Good evening, viewers. Welcome to the Monday's Regional News. We start with news from Venezuela. Venezuela's government and the opposition have asked the United Nations to manage and fund for billions of dollars now held in foreign banks, which will be gradually unfrozen to combat a humanitarian crisis in the oil-rich nation. Delegates announced in Mexico City last Saturday. The money held in Venezuelan-owned accounts overseas was frozen by the US and European banks after the United Nations ramped up sanctions under the administration of President Donald Trump, designed to pressure President Nicolas Maduro to take steps towards free elections. Talks between Maduro's government and its political opponents resumed in Mexico City last Saturday, mediated by Norway after being on ice for more than a year. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken welcomed the talks as an important step towards restoring democracy to Venezuelans. Following the announcement for the UN-administered funds, the U.S. Treasury Department issued a license to Chevron, the second-largest U.S. oil company, to expand operations in Venezuela, allowing it to import Venezuelan crude into the United States. Maduro had said that the aim of the talks was to recover the kidnapped resources for public investment. Then we will see what other issues can be discussed. The funds are set to help stabilize the country's electric grid, improve education infrastructure, and deal with the impact of the year's deadly rains and flooding. It is part of a broad agenda that covers U.S. sanctions on Venezuela, conditions for the next presidential elections, and the status of hundreds of political prisoners, though these issues will not be discussed in this round of the talks. More than 7.1 million Venezuelans have left their country according to UN estimates this year. Many migrated to other Latin American countries or to the United States, as Venezuela battles high inflation and food and medicine shortages. More than half of Venezuelan migrants do not have access to 3 meals per day, UN estimates showed. In Venezuela, a survey by local universities this year showed some 78% of the population was worried about lack of food, compared with 88% in 2021. Some Venezuelans and U.S. critics raised concern that liquidity injection could boost Maduro's credentials before the country's 2024 elections. We now bring you news from Jamaica. The 7 states of emergencies SOEs, which were declared in section of the highland plagued with high crime rates on November 15, are set to fizzle on November 29, after the government failed to win opposition support for their extension in the Senate. At least one opposition senator would have had to side with the 13 government members to get the 2/3 majority vote required to approve the 46-day extension in the 21-seat chamber. After more than 5 hours of debate, the senator voted along party lines, dooming the SOEs currently underway in Westmoreland, St. James, Hanover, St. Catherine, Clarendon, Kingston, and St. Andrew to end tomorrow. Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, leader of the government businesses, reasoned that it was difficult to deny the success in saving lives under the state of emergency. She said in the first week there were only 12 murders across Jamaica, the lowest week of homicide since 2015. Of the 12 murders, 5 were recorded in the 10 divisions in which states of emergencies were declared. Johnson-Smith argued that more than 13,000 murders before the end of the year in a country of Jamaican size is not normal and is beyond the scope of normal policing. Senator Peter Bunting, who led the debate on the opposition side, signaled very early that they would not be supporting the extension, arguing that it took an oath in Parliament to defend the Constitution of Jamaica. Bunting, who is also the opposition spokesman on national security, argued that the government must be able to craft legislation that does not suspend the rights of 3 million people in order to go after 30 violent criminals. Bunting and 6 opposition leaders rose to their feet as he repeated a plural version of his sworn oath as a senator to close his contribution. Further, this opposition senator argued that government members only quote statistics when it suits them. Opposition Senator Lambert Brown said if the government is of the view that the vast majority of Jamaicans want SOEs, it has all right to declare another one. The opposition senator were facing mounting pressure from various groups in relation to how they should vote. Human Rights Lobby Jamaicans for Justice (JFJ) had urged Senator to reject the request for an extension, saying that political expediency is not justification for constitutional breaches. JFJ added that the reason given by the government do not meet the constitutional threshold for a state of emergency to be declared. However, 15 private sector groups had urged Senator to support the extension, with the condition that the government address outstanding key issues critical in achieving full opposition support. And finally, we close with news from Trinidad and Tobago. The country is bracing for more flooding, landslides, and gusty winds through tomorrow morning following yesterday's deluge, which sent rivers across Trinidad over their banks. The Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management collected more than 90 inclement weather reports comprising landslides, flooding, fallen trees, and fallen utility poles. Periods of rainfall will likely continue over the next 24 to 36 hours, resulting in further evaluation of the river level. Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service (TTMS) said, after a very wet November with the last adverse weather alert discontinued on Thursday, soils remained very saturated. Just after midnight, rain, showers, and thunderstorms began across Trinidad and Tobago and fell for nearly 12 consecutive hours. Since midnight, upwards of 100 millimeters of rain has fallen across parts of the country, with locally higher totals across eastern Trinidad. Based on preliminary reports, the worst affected area was central Trinidad, with over 32 incidents of flooding, landslides, fallen trees, fallen utility poles, and a collapsed road. Landslides also hit parts of eastern and northern Trinidad, prompting the Ministry of Works and Transport to indefinitely close the Lady Young Road, one of the main routes into the capital. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. I'm TIANA.